There are times when you believe you've finally figured someone out, only for one quiet moment to reveal how much you never truly understood. You see their silence and assume they don't care. You notice them creating distance and think they've lost interest. Their calm expression makes it seem as though nothing affects them. But appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the quietest person is carrying the loudest emotional struggle, hidden where no one else can see it. When an avoidant steps away, they usually aren't trying to escape another person. More often, they're trying to escape the overwhelming emotions building inside themselves. That inner battle didn't begin with you. It started years before your relationship ever existed. You don't witness the tension rising inside them when emotions become intense. You can't hear the constant mental noise that appears whenever intimacy feels too close. All you notice is the silence, the withdrawal, and the sudden need for space. What remains hidden is a nervous system that instantly shifts into protection mode. Beneath that calm exterior is someone who genuinely wants connection, but also fears losing themselves in it. Early experiences taught them that love could come with pressure, and closeness could feel unsafe. If you've ever questioned why they seem to pull away right when the relationship starts becoming deeper, the answer is painful, but surprisingly simple. They are not running from you. They are running from an old version of themselves that once felt powerless and emotionally exposed. Until that becomes clear, their behavior will continue to feel confusing. Once you understand it, the pattern begins to make sense. Many people misunderstand avoidance because they only judge what they can see. They assume distance means disinterest, or that silence means a lack of emotion. In reality, the truth is far more complex. Avoidant people aren't emotionally cold. They're emotionally protective. They aren't uncaring. They're cautious. They don't withdraw because they feel too little. They often withdraw because they feel so much that they no longer know how to manage those emotions without becoming overwhelmed. Understanding where this pattern comes from changes everything. Emotional avoidance rarely begins in adulthood. It usually develops quietly during childhood, often without dramatic trauma. A child may have grown up in a home where emotional support was inconsistent. Caregivers may have been physically present, but emotionally unavailable. They may have repeatedly heard messages like, "Be strong," "Stop crying," or "Figure it out yourself." Those lessons slowly shape the way a child understands relationships. They begin believing that expressing emotions creates discomfort instead of closeness. Vulnerability starts feeling dangerous rather than safe. Independence becomes more than a strength, it becomes a survival strategy. As the years pass, those early adaptations become automatic. By adulthood, self-reliance feels like the safest place to stand. They trust themselves because relying on others once felt uncertain. Even if they deeply desire love and intimacy, the moment someone moves too close too quickly, old emotional alarms begin sounding. From the outside, it looks like they're rejecting the relationship. Inside, they're simply trying to calm an overwhelmed nervous system. What seems like indifference is often fear. Fear of disappearing beneath someone else's emotional needs, or repeating painful patterns from the past. This is where many people get it wrong. Avoidant individuals are not avoiding you personally. They're avoiding emotional experiences they never learned to handle safely. They're protecting themselves from feeling trapped, pressured, or responsible for carrying more emotional weight than they believe they can manage. Their reactions were formed long before you became part of their life. Psychology describes many of these reactions as deactivating strategies. These are automatic coping responses that create emotional distance whenever closeness begins feeling too intense. It might look like suddenly asking for space after a meaningful conversation. It could sound like shifting into logic whenever emotions become vulnerable. Sometimes it's an internal voice telling them to back away, convincing them others would be happier without them or don't really need them. These responses are rarely attempts to destroy a relationship. They're the nervous system following patterns it learned years ago to stay emotionally safe. The difficult reality is that avoidant people often long for closeness just as deeply as anyone else. They simply need connection that doesn't overwhelm their sense of independence. They want love without feeling consumed. They want support without feeling controlled. They want intimacy without believing they must sacrifice who they are. If you watch closely, you'll often notice them moving back and forth between these two desires. One moment they lean into connection, the next they retreat. They open up, then become quiet again. This isn't because they enjoy sending mixed signals. It's because two powerful forces are constantly pulling against each other. Their longing for closeness collides with their fear of vulnerability. Understanding this changes the way you respond. Instead of taking their silence personally, you recognize it as part of a deeper emotional process. Instead of reacting to their distance with more distance, you begin responding with patience and emotional steadiness. You stop relying on pressure, demands, or emotional intensity to create connection, because those approaches don't make an avoidant feel closer. They activate the very fears that taught them to protect themselves in the first place. When those old alarms are triggered, they don't retreat because they want to lose the relationship. They retreat because every instinct inside them believes stepping back is the only way to feel emotionally safe. The way to reach an avoidant is rarely through bigger emotions or stronger persuasion. What makes the difference is something much quieter. They respond to calm energy, clear communication, and relationships that leave room to breathe. They listen to words that invite instead of insist. They trust reassurance that doesn't come wrapped in pressure. They feel safest with people who offer consistency without trying to control the pace. When an avoidant senses that you're emotionally grounded instead of reactive, something inside them slowly begins to relax. If your presence doesn't carry guilt, urgency, or constant expectations, their nervous system no longer feels the need to stay on guard. In that calmer state, they can genuinely hear what you're saying. They become more willing to trust your intentions. Little by little, they start revealing parts of themselves that have remained hidden for a long time. Avoidant people are absolutely capable of building deep, lasting relationships. The difference is that they cannot be rushed into them. They don't open because someone demands vulnerability. They open because they feel respected. They soften when their boundaries are accepted instead of treated like rejection. When they're given the freedom to process emotions in their own time, the constant inner alarms begin to quiet down. Their protective walls don't disappear overnight, but they slowly become less necessary. That's where authentic connection begins. Not suddenly, but steadily and sincerely. Before searching for the perfect thing to say, or waiting for the ideal moment to reach an avoidant, remember what you're really dealing with. Their withdrawal isn't the problem itself. It's a coping strategy that helped them survive emotionally long before you became part of their life. Once you recognize the person behind those defenses, your entire approach changes. Instead of trying to break through their walls, you create an environment where they no longer feel they need those walls. Real connection comes through steady presence, not force. Through patience, not pressure. Never lose sight of this truth. You cannot truly connect with an avoidant until you understand what they're trying to protect. They're usually not defending themselves against you, they're defending themselves against the fear of losing who they are. The moment they realize you're not trying to control them, change them, or take away their independence, but simply understand them, that's when trust begins to grow. And trust is what eventually opens the door to their heart. If you genuinely want to understand how to connect with an avoidant, you first have to understand what feels valuable to them emotionally. It's not dramatic displays of affection. It's not emotional intensity. Long speeches, constant reassurance, or overwhelming expressions of feeling rarely have the effect people expect. What they respond to most is emotional safety, the kind that respects their personal space, allows them to move at their own pace, and doesn't demand immediate closeness. This is where many people become confused. They believe relationships grow through more conversations, more vulnerability, more emotional sharing, and more reassurance. But with an avoidant, increasing emotional pressure often produces the opposite result. The harder someone pushes, the further they retreat. That doesn't mean they care less. It means their nervous system has learned to interpret emotional intensity as a potential threat, even when it's coming from genuine love. At the center of everything is one important need. An avoidant has to feel they can remain themselves while being close to someone else. Their greatest fear isn't intimacy alone. It's believing that intimacy will cost them their identity. They worry that closeness will slowly erase their independence, their freedom, their emotional boundaries, or the sense of control that helps them feel safe. As soon as those fears are triggered, familiar survival patterns take over. They withdraw, they become quiet. Sometimes they shut down completely. They're not creating distance because they want less of you. They're trying to create distance from expectations that feel emotionally overwhelming. Unfortunately, this is often where relationships become stuck. One person reacts to the withdrawal by trying harder. They ask more questions, seek more reassurance, push for more conversations, or search for immediate clarity. While those actions may feel loving and healthy from their perspective, the avoidant experiences them very differently. Every additional attempt can feel like another layer of pressure. The result becomes a repeating cycle. One person moves closer while the other instinctively steps away. The more one partner reaches, the more the other searches for breathing room. It's easy to mistake this for a lack of love, but that's rarely what's happening. Avoidant people often experience emotions deeply. They simply don't process emotional intensity in the same immediate way others might. Because of that, the language you choose matters more than you may realize. Avoidants don't just hear your words, they constantly evaluate whether those words feel emotionally safe. They're listening for signs that they won't be trapped, overwhelmed, or expected to meet impossible emotional demands. The words that reach them best are the ones that lower pressure, respect their independence, and remind them they have the freedom to engage at a pace that feels manageable. They aren't asking for distance from love, they're asking for distance from urgency. This doesn't mean you have to walk on eggshells around them. It simply means understanding how their nervous system interprets emotionally charged moments. Instead of speaking to their defenses, you learn to communicate in a way that gently moves past them. Calmness, clarity, and emotional steadiness become far more powerful than intensity ever could. When you consistently bring that kind of energy, something remarkable begins to happen. They stop waiting for emotional storms. They stop assuming disappointment or pressure is right around the corner. Their body gradually relaxes, and once they feel safe enough to relax, they begin showing you the parts of themselves they've kept protected for years. Avoidant people are not incapable of meaningful connection. They struggle most when connection arrives wrapped in pressure. Remove the pressure, and the desire for closeness has room to emerge naturally. It seems almost backwards, yet it's often true. The less you chase, the more willing they become to move toward you. The less you demand, the more freely they give. And when they no longer feel cornered, they begin choosing closeness because it finally feels safe enough to choose. For an avoidant, emotional safety is what unlocks genuine connection. Not emotional intensity, not convincing arguments, not dramatic declarations of love. What reaches them most is the feeling that they are safe to simply be themselves. Creating that kind of safety doesn't mean staying silent or pretending your own needs don't matter. It means expressing those needs with calmness instead of urgency. It means being honest about your feelings without expecting an immediate emotional response. It means allowing them time to process instead of treating every quiet moment as rejection. Most importantly, it means staying emotionally grounded so they don't feel responsible for managing your reactions. When someone consistently shows up this way, They become something incredibly uncommon in an avoidant person's life. They become a place of peace. A relationship where they don't have to constantly protect themselves. A space where emotions don't feel unpredictable or explosive. A connection where taking things slowly isn't criticized or misunderstood. This is where meaningful change begins. Avoidant people don't open because someone pushes hard enough. They open because someone creates enough stability for them to lower their guard. Pressure doesn't invite vulnerability. Consistency does. They don't become emotionally available because they're persuaded to. They do so because over time, they genuinely feel safe enough to choose it. That feeling of safety isn't built through grand romantic gestures or perfectly crafted speeches. It's created through small, consistent moments. Small signals that quietly communicate, "I'm here, but I'm not going to overwhelm you." Signals that say, "You don't have to become someone else to be accepted." Signals that remind them that being close doesn't mean losing their freedom. When your communication carries that kind of calm confidence, your words stop feeling like something their nervous system needs to defend against. Instead, they become evidence that this relationship is different. They become proof that closeness can exist without pressure. That's the shift that matters most, because lasting connection is never built through force. It's built through emotional safety. And that's the language an avoidant hears more clearly than anything else. Create that environment, and they'll often meet you with a level of openness that pressure could never produce. Now let's talk about 3 simple words that can sometimes mean even more to an avoidant than hearing, "I love you." This isn't because those words are magical. It's because they speak directly to the psychology behind avoidant attachment, the nervous system, and the fears that quietly shape their relationships. For many avoidant people, hearing "I love you" can bring mixed emotions. While those words are beautiful, they can also feel like the beginning of new expectations or emotional obligations. If someone has spent years associating love with losing independence, even genuine affection can activate fear instead of comfort. So what words reach them without triggering those old defenses? Surprisingly, they're not dramatic or deeply romantic. They're simple, steady, and freeing. They don't create pressure. They don't demand a response. They gently open the door instead of trying to pull someone through it. Those 3 words are, "I get it." At first glance, they seem almost too ordinary to matter. But beneath their simplicity is something incredibly meaningful. They communicate understanding, and for many avoidant people, feeling understood is one of the deepest forms of intimacy. When you calmly say, "I get it," you're communicating much more than agreement. You're saying, "I don't see you as broken. I don't expect you to become someone else for us to stay connected." You're showing that their need for space doesn't automatically threaten the relationship. You're giving them the emotional room they rarely feel they have. For someone with avoidant tendencies, that sense of autonomy often feels just as important as love itself. Those words tell them that you recognize their inner experience without trying to control it. You acknowledge their fears without reinforcing them. You respect their pace instead of fighting against it. For them, trust isn't created through emotional intensity. It's built in quiet moments where they don't feel judged, criticized, or rushed. That matters because avoidant individuals are highly sensitive to emotional pressure. The moment they believe they're disappointing someone or failing to meet expectations, their instinct is often to withdraw. But when your response is simply, "I get it," you interrupt that familiar pattern. Instead of increasing pressure, you reduce it. Instead of making them feel trapped, you remind them they can stay connected without losing themselves. Those words also touch something much deeper that many avoidant people rarely admit out loud. Many are fully aware of their own patterns. They know they withdraw. They know they need more time than others. They know their silence can leave people confused. Because of that, many quietly carry the belief that they're too difficult to love, or too emotionally complicated for someone to truly understand. Hearing "I get it," spoken with genuine calm, challenges that belief. It tells them they don't have to hide who they are. It reassures them that someone is trying to understand the reasons behind their behavior instead of only reacting to it. It says, "I'm not just judging what you do, I understand why you do it." That's what many avoidant people have been longing for all along. They don't need someone who agrees with every decision they make. They don't expect people to ignore their own needs or carefully avoid every boundary. What they truly value is someone who understands the deeper story beneath their reactions. Someone who recognizes that needing space isn't the same as not caring. Someone who sees withdrawal as self-protection rather than rejection. When they experience that kind of understanding, something inside them finally begins to settle. The constant need to defend themselves becomes a little quieter. And in that quieter place, genuine trust has room to grow. The person who looks beyond an avoidant's protective behaviors and sees the human being underneath is the one who creates real change. When you say, "I get it," you're offering more than agreement. You're showing that you're not trying to fight the way they protect themselves. You're choosing to understand why those defenses exist. Those words should never be used as a tactic to get a different reaction. Their power comes from being genuine. "I get it" creates emotional safety because it communicates acceptance, not pressure. When an avoidant truly feels understood, something begins to shift. Their guard lowers. They become more relaxed and naturally engage more in the relationship, not because they were persuaded, but because it finally feels safe enough to do so. Freedom is what allows an avoidant to move toward closeness. When they feel pressured, they instinctively pull away. When they feel respected, they move closer on their own. That's why these three words matter. They protect what matters most to them, the feeling that they can stay connected without losing themselves. Their emotional walls were never built to keep love out. They were built to keep their inner world stable. When someone genuinely understands that, those walls slowly become bridges instead of barriers. For many avoidants, "I get it" can feel even more comforting than "I love you." Love may sometimes feel like expectation, but understanding feels like relief. It calms their nervous system and reminds them they don't have to sacrifice their independence to stay connected. Once they feel understood, the battle between wanting closeness and fearing it begins to soften. Slowly, their behavior changes. They communicate more. They stay present in conversations. They begin sharing small parts of their world. These changes may seem subtle, but for an avoidant, they're significant. They aren't changing because they're forcing themselves. They're changing because opening up no longer feels unsafe. They begin realizing that closeness doesn't have to erase their freedom, and that intimacy and independence can exist together. This is how avoidant patterns evolve, not through pressure, but through repeated experiences of emotional safety. Over time, they begin connecting closeness with peace instead of overwhelm. They learn to trust not only you, but themselves within the relationship. When that happens, they often love with remarkable loyalty, consistency, and intention. Their emotional depth has always been there. It simply needed the right environment to emerge. That environment is built through calmness, patience, respect, and genuine understanding, not emotional intensity or constant demands. Along the way, you change too. You stop trying to fix or reshape another person and start creating a relationship where both people feel safe enough to be fully themselves. That's what real connection is. Not changing someone's nature, but creating a space where trust and authenticity can grow naturally. Remember this above all else. An avoidant doesn't transform because they're convinced. They transform because they finally feel understood. And when they reach that place of safety, they stop running, not from you, but from the fears they've carried for most of their lives.